The final shove was not an act of war, but a personal vendetta delivered with a cold smile in the high, thin air of the Hindu Kush. As Sergeant Marcus Vale plummeted down the sheer rock face, the last sound he heard wasn't his own scream, but the fading laughter of the man he'd once called brother. His unit was gone, his comms were dead, and his body was breaking against the mountain. Rescue was impossible. The official report would list him as missing, presumed dead. Only one man on the planet knew different, a ghost from Vale's past living in self-imposed exile 5,000 miles away, who felt the echo of that fall in his bones. To save him, that ghost would have to become the legend one more time and paint a masterpiece of vengeance across a canvas of stone and snow. The mountain air was sharp as a blade, tasting of ice and dust. Marcus Vale's lungs burned with every ragged breath, the weight of his pack and rifle a familiar burden. His team moved like shadows along the narrow goat trail, the Afghan sun baking the brown rock around them. Intel had been solid. A high-value target was holed up in a cave system ahead. But as they rounded a sharp outcrop, the world erupted. The gunfire wasn't from ahead, it was from above, and it was precise, cutting down two of his men before they could take cover. Ambush. They were pinned, rocks splintering around them. Vale barked orders, returning fire at the hidden positions above. Then, a different sound cut through the chaos. A voice he hadn't heard in 7 years, crackling over a private frequency his team couldn't hear. "Little busy, Elias." Vale snarled, squeezing off a burst. "You're in a kill box, Marcus." The voice, that of Elias Kane, replied, calm and cold as ever. "They herded you here. The intel was a gift." Kane was their eyes in the sky, a drone operator now, but once he had been something else, a sniper whose name was whispered with a mix of awe and fear. Vale had severed ties after a mission gone wrong in Syria, blaming Kane's ruthless calculus for the death of civilians. Now, this ghost from his past was his only link to command. A grenade rolled down the slope. Vale scrambled, the blast showering him with debris. Dazed, he looked up to see a figure descending from the rocks, not a Taliban fighter, but a man in mismatched tactical gear with a cruel, familiar face. Javed, an ex-Afghan commando turned warlord, a man Vale had captured and humiliated years prior. Javed smiled, the gold tooth glinting. "Sergeant Vale, we have an account to settle." Vale raised his rifle, but a burst from Javed's man shattered it in his hands. His team was either dead or silenced. Javed stalked forward, grabbing Vale by his body armor. "No quick death for you," he hissed. He dragged Vale to the edge of the trail, where the earth fell away into a dizzying abyss. Vale fought, but he was out of ammunition, out of strength. He could hear Kane's voice, urgent now, in his earpiece. "Marcus, on your 6th, the ridge, I have a shot," but it was too late. Javed's smile widened. "Say hello to the rocks for me." With a grunt of effort, he shoved Vale backward into nothingness. The world upended. "Sky rock, sky." The impact was a series of brutal, sickening collisions. A slam against an outcropping that cracked his ribs, a violent tumble that wrenched his shoulder, a slide down a steep scree slope that tore his clothes and skin. He was a doll thrown down a staircase of stone, finally fetching up against a stunted, twisted pine tree, halfway down the cliff face. The world swam, then went dark. When consciousness returned, it was a tide of pure, white-hot agony. Every breath was a knife in his side. His left arm hung useless, the shoulder dislocated. His right leg was bent at a wrong angle below the knee. He was on a tiny, precarious ledge, maybe 6 feet wide, the pine tree his only anchor. Below, another 300-foot drop yawned. Above, the cliff face stretched up an impossible 200 feet to the trail. He was above on a wall. The sun began to dip, painting the peaks in bloody orange. The cold, a penetrating, skeletal cold, started to seep into his bones. He fumbled for his comms. The headset was gone, torn away in the fall. His emergency beacon was a shattered mess of plastic on his vest. He was utterly alone and utterly silent. In a darkened room in Nevada, Elias Kane ripped his headset off and threw it against the wall. The feed from Vale's helmet cam had dissolved into a violent, spinning chaos before going black. The drone's thermal signature showed a body, hot with trauma, coming to rest on a ledge. Then, as the sun set and the rock lost its heat, that signature began to cool, blending with the mountain. He replayed the audio. The shove, the laughter, the long, silent fall. He hadn't just witnessed a murder attempt. He had witnessed a betrayal. The ambush was too clean, too knowing. Someone had sold Vale's team out. Kane's hands, which hadn't held a real rifle in years, trembled slightly. He made coffee he didn't drink, staring at maps of the region. He was out. He was done. The incident in Syria had broken something in him. The absolute certainty that his crosshairs held the truth. He traded his sniper rifle for a joystick, finding a colder, more removed clarity in pixels and payloads. But this was Marcus. Marcus, who had been his spotter, his brother. Marcus, who had looked at him with disgust after Aleppo and walked away. Kane had accepted that judgment as his penance. Now, Marcus was dying on a mountainside, and the man who put him there was celebrating. Kane accessed files he had no right to see. Satellite imagery, weather patterns, communications intercept from the region. He saw Javed's men, a heat signature cluster in the caves, celebrating. He saw no movement toward the cliff. To them, Vale was already dead. That was Kane's only advantage. He calculated. The ledge was inaccessible by foot from above or below. A hello extraction would be seen and shot down in minutes. A full squad fast roping? A suicide mission. There was only one way. A single impossible shot. Not to kill, but to save. He would need to thread a needle from over a mile away, in thinning mountain air, with winds that danced like demons. He would need his old rifle, Veritas, currently stored in a vault at Quantico. He would need to be there, on an opposing ridge, in person. The legend would have to come out of retirement. He sent 2 encrypted messages. The first was to a general who still owed him a favor, a flight to Bagram, and the release of his equipment. The second was longer, a data packet containing evidence of the leak within the Afghan command, the betrayal that doomed Vale's team. He attached a single line, cleaning my own house. Stay out of my way. 24 hours later, Elias Kane stood on a wind-scoured ridge in the pre-dawn dark, 11 miles from the valley where Vale clung to life. He assembled Veritas, the components fitting together with a series of soft, precise clicks that were more familiar to him than his own heartbeat. The rifle was an extension of his will. He lay prone on a thermal blanket, his eye finding the scope. The world narrowed to a tunnel. At the end of that tunnel, magnified 1,000 times, was a tiny, grayish blotch on a vast cliff face, the ledge. And beside the blotch, the faintest, irregular bloom of yellow and pink in his thermal scope, a human form, growing colder. Marcus Vale drifted in and out a haze of pain and cold. He had managed to use a strip of his torn shirt and a branch to splint his broken leg. It was a clumsy, agonizing job that left him sweating and shivering. The dislocated shoulder was a fiery knot he couldn't address. Thirst was a desert in his throat. He sucked on a pebble. Hallucinations began to flicker at the edges of his vision. His fallen teammates calling to him, his mother offering a glass of water. He fought them, focusing on the slow crawl of the sun. He thought of Kane, the last voice he'd heard. Had Kane seen him fall? Did he even care? Their friendship had died in the rubble of that Syrian village. Vale had seen the child's body, and he had seen Kane's face, empty of regret, already calculating the next shot. He'd called him a monster. Now he prayed for that monster's cold, impeccable skill. A crack echoed across the vast valley. A rockfall, he thought dully. Then, a second later, a small, heavy object hissed down and landed with a thump in the soft dirt of the ledge, 2 feet from his head. It was a steel canister, smoking with cold. He stared, brain sluggish. Another crack, another hiss. This canister struck the rock face above him and rebounded onto the ledge. It was not an attack. It was a delivery. With his good arm, he dragged the first canister to him. It was military issue with a simple latch. Inside, nestled in vacuum-sealed foam, was a water bladder with a tube, a syringe of morphine, a small GPS locator blinking with a green light, and a high-calorie gel pack. There was no note. None was needed. Only one person on Earth could make that shot. Kane was here, and he was talking to him in the only language they both fully understood, ballistics. Tears of sheer relief mingled with the grime on Vale's face. He injected the morphine, the warmth flooding his body, dulling the sharp edges of his agony. He drank, the water tasting like life itself. The second canister contained a compact survival blanket, a smaller .45 caliber pistol with a single magazine, and a tiny, waterproof earpiece. He inserted it. A voice, clear and calm, filled his skull. "Can you hold a pistol, Marcus?" Vale fumbled the weapon into his right hand. "Yeah. Good. Javid knows you're alive." My data leak forced his mole in the command to run. They put it together. "A patrol is coming down a lower path to confirm a kill. They'll be in your canyon in 10 minutes. You'll see them before I can." The relief evaporated. Vale pushed himself up against the rock, the pistol a cold, heavy comfort. "How many?" "4. They think you're crippled. Prove them wrong." The line went silent. Vale waited, the morphine sharpening his focus even as it dulled his pain. He saw movement below, for figures, picking their way along the base of the cliff, looking up. One pointed directly at his ledge. They were well within range. Vale steadied his shaking hand against the tree trunk. He was not a sniper. He was a rifleman. But this was point-blank defense. He fired. The shot went wide, sparking off rock. The men scattered, then laughed, shouting taunts in Pashto. They began to climb, finding handholds in the ancient rock. They were coming for him. Vale took a deep, burning breath, aimed at the lead climber, and squeezed the trigger twice. The man screamed, losing his grip and falling onto the men below in a tangle of limbs. From across the valley, a sound like the sky tearing itself apart. The head of the second climber snapped back, and he dropped silently. A second shot, a millisecond later, and the third man crumpled. The fourth froze, clinging to the rock, looking around in terror for a threat he could not see. The shot that took him was a through in the chest. Silence returned, heavier than before. "Clear," Kane's voice said, devoid of triumph. "Now the hard part. The exfil bird is inbound, but Javid is mobilizing. He'll throw everything at that canyon to stop it. I have to keep his head down. You have to be ready to move." "Move?" "Kane, I can't walk." "You won't have to. Just don't let go." Before Vale could ask what that meant, a new sound grew. The deep, rhythmic thumping of helicopter blades echoing off the canyon walls. A Black Hawk, riding fast and low, appeared at the far end of the valley. At the same moment, muzzle flashes erupted from the cave complex high on the opposite wall. Javid's men, with heavy machine guns, aiming to shred the helicopter. Then, from Kane's perch, Veritas spoke again. This was not surgical fire. This was suppressive, psychological warfare. Kane began putting rounds not just into firing positions, but into ammunition stacks, into the cave mouths, into the very optics of their weapons. Each shot was a statement of dominion. He was not just hitting them. He was telling them they were already dead, that the mountain itself was shooting back. The machine gun fire became sporadic, panicked. The Black Hawk flared hard, its wheels hovering just over the yawning drop beside Vale's ledge. A crew chief leaned out, the downdraft a hurricane of noise and dust. He threw a harness attached to a cable. "Hook up," he yelled. Vale's fingers were numb. He dropped the harness once, his vision swimming. He grabbed it, fighting the buckles with one working hand. He clipped it to his body armor, just as a lucky burst from the caves stitched across the helicopter's side. The bird jerked. "We're taking fire. Go, go, go." The cable went taut. Vale was ripped off the ledge into empty space, swinging like a pendulum under the roaring helicopter. He spun, the canyon walls a dizzying blur. He saw the cave complex, saw the last machine gunner taking aim for a final, desperate burst. He saw a tiny, almost imperceptible flash from the distant ridge. The gunner dropped. The Black Hawk banked hard, pulling Vale into its shadow, and accelerated down the canyon, leaving the deadly valley behind. As they cleared the ridge, Vale, hanging in the air, looked back. The opposing ridge was empty, just rock and scrub in the morning sun. There was no sign anyone had ever been there. In his ear, Kane's voice returned, faint now with distance. "Still with me, brother?" Vale, buffeted by the wind, looking at the vast, unforgiving landscape where he was meant to die, found a smile on his cracked lips. "Yeah, Elias, I'm with you." The line was quiet for a long moment. "Good. Welcome home." The connection died. On his ridge, Elias Kane broke down Veritas, wiping every component clean. He left no brass, no print, no trace. He was a ghost again. But as he shouldered his pack for the long walk to his own exfil point, the weight felt different. Lighter, somehow. He had not just saved a life. He had, perhaps, reclaimed a fragment of his own. The legend could fade back into myth. The man, for the first time in years, could breathe. This response is AI-generated, for reference only.